All right. Well, heavy gear shift. That's Ron and me trying to make
Yeah,
gear
it
shift.
was more like a creaking door, wasn't it?
Yeah, we have an actual tire screech.
Yes, we have tire screech.
So let's tire screech from good news to not so good news.
Oh, wow.
I guess. We'll get there in a moment here. So I have a new study. Christian, here it is. Whoa!
There it is.
I got a slow right foot there to hit the gas or the brake. I don't even know what I'm doing. So Gallup has been measuring a specific question about clergy since the 1980s, okay? And it's this question. They want to know what percentage of Americans say clergy have high or very high levels of honesty. So do you think pastors have a high level of honesty? And you have to pick like not at all or a little bit. I don't know. High or very high level of honesty. Okay? And ethics. Honesty and ethics. Back in 1985, 67% of Americans said pastors or clergy have very high or high levels of honesty and ethics.
65, you said?
67.
Oh.
That's pretty good. I mean,
Pretty good, but still low for what I would hope.
And in the 80s, I guess, I don't know. I guess I'm a little surprised it wasn't higher than that, but still.
Yeah. We were starting to have, Jimmy Swaggart, Jim Baker, Marvin Gorwell. I can't remember his last
Wow.
name, but there was a string of preachers who were coming down with sexual ethics problems.
Yeah, and that's, you guys weren't even born yet, but I guess it's been a thing for a long time, right? Because it feels like it's a new thing, but it happened then. So then all the way up into 2001, fast forward, 64% of Americans found pastors to be very high levels of honesty and ethics, or just high, okay? 2006, 58%. Still more than half.
Yeah.
2010, 53%. Wow. Still more than half. Now, 2013, we get a change. It drops to 47% of Americans have a high or very high view of clergy's honesty and ethics. In 2020, it had dropped down to 39%.
Wow.
Gallup out now that this last year, 32% of Americans
Yikes.
believe that clergy have very high or high levels of honesty and ethics. 32%. What do we think of that?
I mean, it makes sense just with things that have been in the news the last couple of years. People are leaving church in droves. So now I'm wondering, are people leaving church because they don't trust pastors, or do they not trust pastors because they're leaving church?
Yeah, I mean, Christianity Today said people are more likely to believe in the moral standards held by nurses, police officers, and chiropractors than religious leaders.
Chiropractors rank above
Yeah,
That's
pastors.
interesting.
I mean,
Oh,
I'm
boy.
not anti-chiropractor. If you're a chiropractor listening, God bless you. I've been to them, and they make a huge difference in people's lives with back pain and neck pain and such. But I don't think anyone would predict that they have higher moral and ethical standards than pastors.
Right.
But that's what the public thinks.
Wow.
And part of that is what we're being fed in the
Yeah.
news, wherever you consume it, Facebook, X, TV, whatever. It all, like the bad news is what gets reported. And unfortunately, we've had a lot of bad news for pastors.
Yeah, we have. And I want to zero in on one guy. His name is Nathan Finn. He was quoted pretty extensively in this Christianity Today article about the Gallup poll. Again, finding only 32% of Americans believe clergy have high or very high levels of honesty and ethics. Here's what he said. As American culture becomes increasingly pluralistic and post-Christian, we can't assume that Americans in general default to a positive view of clergy. Ministers must work harder to gain public trust than was the case even a generation ago. I mean, I think a lot of us have the expectation that, come on, it's clergy. Clergy, you got to
Right.
trust them. Clergy equals trust. What's wrong with you people not trusting them, right? That's our attitude. It's mine.
Yeah.
What's wrong with all you people?
Because we're inside the church. We have a pastor at our local church, and we respect the heck out of him.
I mean, even some people in the church have been deeply hurt by clergy members.
Oh, sure. Yeah. He goes on to say that scandals like clergy sex abuse, growing political polarization, and evangelicals' countercultural moral positions can contribute to the decline in credibility among clergy. He said, especially among those who have either had, to your credit, Daria, bad church experiences, or whose worldview assumptions are already at odds with historic Christian beliefs. But pastors have to work harder to gain public trust. I don't think we like that idea. Pastors would probably kind of scoff at it. Why don't we need trust from the world? But I think it's an interesting point.
Mm-hmm.
So what I want to chat about here after we pause for prayer is, to what extent is this true that pastors need to work harder to gain trust? Like it's on us to turn the tide of these numbers from Gallup. Mm. And then if so, what would it actually look like to work harder? If you're just joining us, we've been chatting about brand new Gallup poll results. They've been asking this question for many years, and they've asked Americans, like, to what extent do you see clergy as having honesty and ethics? Like pastors, do they have honesty and ethics? And they've categorized those who say, oh, they have high or very high. Pastors, high or very high levels of honesty and ethics. Back in 1985, 67% of Americans felt that way. Dropped, recent poll says 32. Only 32% of Americans think clergy have very high or high levels of honesty and ethics. And there's this guy, Nathan Finn, executive director of the Institute for Transformational Leadership at North Greenville University. He says in the Christianity Today that ministers must work harder to gain public trust than was the case even a generation ago. And I would imagine some people would wholeheartedly reject the principle that pastors got to work harder to gain credibility with the world.
That's the key, though, with the world. You can't expect them to automatically defer. I mean, I remember when my oldest son was in high school and he was complaining about some teacher, and I said, well, you need to respect him. And he said, I'll show him respect when he shows me respect. And I'm like, oh, wait a minute. There's a miscommunication here. He's the teacher. He automatically gets your respect unless he has done something to break that. He doesn't have to earn your respect. You're the student. Mm. You're the snot-nosed little 15-year-old. I don't know if I went that far. But
You thought it, though.
Yeah, those days are gone.
I know.
I don't disagree with the principle, Ron, that you're saying, but that idea, totally gone.
Yeah, now kids are like, I'm equal to my parent. You should respect me and do what I say. And I'm like, no. Even if you are my granddaughter and you're cute as a bug, you still respect your mama.
Well, and see, I as a teacher, when I became a teacher way back in the olden days, in 2002, I started teaching. I had a choice, really, because the culture had already shifted. You don't automatically get respect because you're a teacher. I can either be mad about it,
yeah,
or accept it and adjust how I behave, essentially, and how I approach classroom management. I would have been pretty miserable if I would have been mad about it. I got to tell you that. Your guys' generation doesn't believe in that automatic respect bit, right?
It depends. There are people in positions of authority that, in my mind, do automatically get respect, but I do think in a lot of cases respect has to be earned, and I do think that actually does apply to pastors, even a pastor in a church. I mean, I've seen some pastors that honestly don't deserve respect because their behavior when Sunday's over is not deserving of respect. You need to show your congregants and your community that you are an upstanding person and a man of God. It's not on them to automatically assume that. In fact, I think it's healthy that we're not assuming that because there are so many people and even pastors that claim to be Christian, but their behavior says otherwise.
Well, somebody could say, well, if you went to go get know my pastor, you would know he's great.
Maybe your pastor is great, but I need to go and use the spirit of discernment that God has given me to make that decision myself.
Lauren?
I don't know. I don't think it's so much of a bad thing that they need to gain respect.
Why?
Because I think that's them showing the love of Christ to humble themselves, to say like, here's who I am. I'm open. I'm honest. Get to know me. And they're not saying you need to respect me just because I'm a pastor. I just don't think that's very loving. I think it's okay for them to say like, oh, sure, you can get to know me. That's fine. Especially if it's on the outside.
Right. This is a random person spouting some nonsense I don't believe in. Why should I respect them?
But somebody could say, well, pastors shouldn't really be concerned about what the world thinks of them,
Sure.
whether American society thinks about them. What they should be concerned about is shepherding their flock. The end.
How can they shepherd the flock that doesn't respect them, though? And we're in a culture that, like you said, Brian, you need to earn respect. Yes, God is our priority, but we can't reach the world if we don't find a way to relate to them. And that's not lowering our standards. That's not betraying God. We just need to figure out how we can connect with these people and show them that we're trustworthy.
I think our trust has been broken too many times.
Right.
And unfortunately, it's going to take some time for that to be rebuilt, just with a random stranger pastor.
Well, you know what the problem is, somebody would say. They go, well, just people are only focusing on the negative. They're ignoring all the positive things that churches do in our communities. So if they would just shift what they're looking at, this wouldn't be a problem.
So then we just don't look at bad things anymore?
Well, I'm just telling you what I've heard a million times doing
things?
this.
I mean, name a time a church was in the news for something other than a scandal in the last 5 years. What positive things should we be looking at?
Well, Daria, they don't cover positive things. They only cover the negative.
That's not my fault as a consumer.
So if I understand you right, you're saying we can't fight the reality that bad things make the news.
Right. You're just going to drive yourself crazy. Like, you just need to accept the world as it is and then work within the confines of the rules the world has set up.
Yeah. And again, I think many people I encounter are like, listen, they need to just pay attention and they'll see that our pastors are trustworthy and ethical. This is their problem because they've got it wrong. How do you respond to that line of thinking?
Maybe they don't have it wrong. I mean, I've seen church hurt in my own family where people have walked away from congregation for years because of genuine deep-seated hurt. People walk away from the faith because of a bad pastor. You can't assume that just because your pastor is upstanding and right that their experiences are the same as yours.
Oh, but Daria, you haven't met my pastor. That's somebody else's problem. Pastor at my church, he's great. And if people would just come meet him, there wouldn't be a problem.
We're all somebody else to somebody else. I mean, and nearly 60% of America doesn't trust pastors, so maybe this is not as isolated a problem as you think.
Yeah, and I bring up all those points because this is the debate that I've heard for years. You bring up a problem, and we shift the blame. We never want to say that we have any responsibility to change what people think of us. Or we just shouldn't care at all what they think of us. Should we care what people think of us and our pastors? Us being followers of Jesus? Like, should we care if the world doesn't think our pastors are honest and ethical?
I think we should care. It shouldn't be our top concern, but because you can't change everybody, there are going to be those who, I hate Christianity, I hate Christ, anyone related to it, so pastors are especially hateable. But there will be, a lot who are open to the truth once they know it and they have to see it. There's a lot of other things a pastor has to do besides be concerned what the world outside of the church thinks of him, but he should not ignore it completely.
Do you agree with Ron?
I think I do. Yeah.
Yeah, I think
you.
I think it's okay.
That's a miracle. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I think it shouldn't be our number one priority. But I do think if your plan is to shepherd a flock and your plan is to bring people into church, you need to care if people think you're trustworthy.
Okay, so I think that last part's the key, right? Because my next question is why should we? It's not just that pastors should care, and we should care how people view pastors, but why we should care. Why is it that we should care? You got to expand on that because I know you were hinting at it.
People aren't going to come into your church. They're not going to learn about who Jesus is. They're not going to hear from you. They're not going to really, truly hear you if they don't trust you. Mm-hmm. And what is your message if they don't listen to you? It's nothing. Mm-hmm. They have to be able to trust you so that they can hear your message.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it makes me think of, I had one really great education course in my undergrad, Dr. Rocco was his name. Doesn't that sound cool?
Yeah.
And he was just like countercultural when it came to education. Because usually what happens is like if students fail a test, whole class, teachers get really mad at the students. You didn't study. And he goes, no. If the students fail to learn, change yourself.
Yeah, that's on me.
You did something wrong. We don't like that, though, as educators. Set that aside. We don't like that as people, as humans. Like if somebody doesn't receive the message we intended to send, it's their fault. No. Take responsibility. The only thing you can change is yourself.
Right.
So we're agreeing with this guy, Nathan Finn, in Christianity Today, that ministers, and I would say us as their flock, need to work harder to be viewed as honest and ethical.
Yeah.
Okay, so what would that look like? If you're just joining us, we've been chatting about new Gallup poll data indicating that back in 1985, 67% of Americans said clergy have high or very high levels of honesty and ethics. And this most recent data from them, just last year, only 32% feel that way. An expert in Christianity Today named Nathan Finn from North Greenville University says ministers must work harder to gain public trust than was the case a generation ago. We all in our conversation seem to agree that there is some truth to that. I'm not saying that's the only solution, but they must work harder. Okay, so how? How could a pastor and his congregation today work harder to gain public trust for their honesty and ethics?
I think the things you do in your community go a long way towards showing that you're trustworthy. My pastor got really involved with some other local Brunswick area pastors, and they helped support the building of a inclusive playground. So children with disabilities could play just as easily as fully able-bodied, I guess, children could play.
I love that.
And so, this big thing for the community was supported in great part by a number of churches. And getting involved like that, the local press, plays up this event. They can't help but say that these churches were involved. So people see, oh, hey, church doing something for the community. It's great if you build yourself a rec center where you can have your people play basketball or volleyball or whatever.
Yeah.
But that doesn't reach out to the community. You need to do things out there that don't necessarily do anything for you.
Yeah, amen. Well said, Ron. Again, we'd love to hear from you on this too, 440-546-2255. What do you think? How could pastors actually and their congregations work harder to gain the public's perception of us as ethical and honest? 440-546-2255. Daria, any thoughts on what they could actually do?
I mean, we've been talking a lot in the last couple of weeks about pastors meeting people where they are. We talked about the pastor that left his congregation to disciple people on a farm. And he's just like, all are welcome. This is a super casual environment. We're going to read the Bible under a tree. I think people would respond better to that. Last week we talked about, or maybe 2 weeks ago, a pastor that's currently in legal hot water because he was using his church as a sanctuary for the homeless when it was super cold. And it's technically bad press, but I think a lot of people are going to look at that and say he doesn't care if he gets in legal trouble. He just wants to help people.
Yeah, it's really kind of getting out of the church walls and kind of getting your hands dirty in a sense, right?
Yeah.
Good point. Yeah. Lauren, any thoughts on how pastors and congregations can work harder in this area?
Yeah, I think you have to be in your community for people to trust you. Kind of like Ron said. You have to show yourself to be someone who is trustworthy. You can't just stay in your office. They're not going to trust you when you're in your office because you're not showing yourself to them. You're not being honest and open with them.
Yeah, and I think we have to accept the years where it was popular back in the 80s and 90s to have cool new programs at the church and telling people, come on in. You should come here. Come here to us. We've got this, we've got that, we've got this, we've got that. It's awesome. You'll love it. Like, I think those days are over. Not that we shouldn't do those things. Yeah, sure. We need programs and such, but I don't know. Are people going to do that if only 32% of America thinks that clergy have high levels of honesty and ethics? Why in the world would they send themselves or their kids into our buildings?
They wouldn't. There's a fair amount of people that genuinely believe that Christianity is a cult. But beyond people that are just like, I'm not sure I trust pastors. There are people that genuinely think we're a cult. So why in the world would I go into your building and I have no clue what you might try to do to me? There are people that genuinely believe that, and we need to accept that and try to fix our image in the public eye.
Yeah. I mean, think about how many years, right? Churches would focus really hard on investing in their property to make it more appealing to go into, the things it had, the programs it was doing. At the time, I think that worked great, but boy, maybe we invest much more in what we do outside the walls.
Yeah. No amount of smoke machines and laser lights are going to draw people into your church anymore. You need to make it appealing out in the world. If you're, and it's more than just like show up at your local town square and have a service outdoors there. That you may get a few people walking by who stop out of curiosity, but I think you have to actually get involved. You have to, be part of. Maybe they're having a community run, and you want to put some team members in the run wearing your church's shirt as a way of showing we're involved. Maybe you put a float in the 4th of July parade or whatever your community may do. And I was at a church that did that once. We had a
cool
Christmas float.
I don't have to run, do I? You're mentioning running.
You don't have to. You could maybe stage a water station, where you pass out cups of water to people.
I could do that. Yeah.
Cups of cold water given in Jesus' name.
I want to throw out something unpopular that this other guy said, so get mad at him first.
Okay.
But I think one of the reasons we've so precipitously lost views of honesty and ethics, this guy, Nathan Finn, says, he pointed out that scandals like clergy sex abuse, growing political polarization, and some other things, it'll be controversial to say it, but I think we've lost credibility as honest and ethical when we start publicly, as churches, taking sides politically. We draw a line that prevents people from who disagree with that political position. This goes to both sides, from being willing to even entertain the idea of Jesus. We care. Some of us, some Christians, seem to care more about politics than they do about Jesus, more about the preservation of American culture than their citizenship in heaven and role as ambassador of Christ. It's not a popular position, but I think he's absolutely right. Christians are known more for hitching their boats, their wagon to politics.
Some of them have really big boats.
Than they are to Jesus.
Yeah, I think we're known now more for what we hate than love and the good news, which is literally what gospel means.
Yeah. And I don't want people to think we're just like talking out of the side of our mouths, okay? The qualifications for an overseer in 1 Timothy 3, it says respectable. A respectable person. In the ESV, it says respectable. In the NLT, it says he must not be, where is it? He must exercise self-control, live wisely, and have a good reputation.
Yeah. A good,
Respectable or have a good reputation in two different versions. So we're not just saying, oh, we think you have to respect people. No, that's literally the qualifications of an overseer in the Bible.
And I'm so glad you brought that up, because that's my other part, is I think we bear responsibility for losing sight of biblical qualifications for leaders among us. And by the way, one of the points, and if you look at, it's both 1 Timothy and Titus. There's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 qualities. 16, 17, 18. Sorry, 18. Only one of them has to do with their ability to preach.
And the rest say he has to look good in a tailored T-shirt and $3,000 sneakers.
No, I mean, things that probably wouldn't get past your committee picking the next pastor. Because it's things like they're above reproach, they're sober-minded, self-controlled, respectable, hospitable, not violent, gentle.
NLT says he must enjoy having guests in his home, and he must love what is good.
Yeah, like their greatest gifts for your church leader ought to be outside of the pulpit.
Right.
Is that wrong?
No.
Tell me out, because someone is punching me in through the radio or TV.
He must not be arrogant. He must not be quick-tempered. He must not be violent or dishonest with money.
Yeah. And see, when we prioritize the wrong things, right, we end up with people who fall from grace in public and erode the public's trust in the honesty and ethics of pastors. It's too bad.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know, do we want to follow somebody who's like that? Or
Follow
would we someone who's honest, like gentle?
Yeah.
I don't think we want to. I think our sinful hearts want to follow somebody who's loud, bombastic,
Ooh.
like goes after those other people that are doing it wrong. Right? That's what we want to do. We want to be on the winning team.
Yeah, but if that were my preacher, I would have serious thoughts about looking for another church.
Well, you and I would, but we've got a whole bunch of American Christians who that's what they're looking for. Somebody who'll draw harder lines.
They're looking for the misinterpretation of the Messiah that the Jews were looking for. They're looking for someone to ride in on a white horse and smash the Roman elite.
Sorry, that's so true, right? It's we lose sight of who Jesus really was. He was the sacrificial leader. Everybody left him because of his love and grace and his truth. And he gave himself up. He didn't conquer.
Right.
But we just want to talk about when he turned over tables.
Which happened once
Oh, gosh, yeah.
in 33 years.
If I had $1 for every time somebody brought that up as an excuse to be a jerk, I wouldn't even know what I would do. But yeah, maybe you hate the idea. We'd love to hear from you. 440-546-2255. You could also, you can email us, go to our website, find us on the internet, go to Facebook, YouTube. I mean, maybe you disagree in the idea that we ought to work harder to gain public trust. But we, as a team, seem to think we really do have to work harder. And it's not going to be that hard, to be honest with you. Just, do what Jesus said. He mapped it all out for us, I guess, didn't he?
I mean, it's a little hard with our sin nature to do that.
Well, yeah, I mean, right. It's not easy, but you thought.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Someone laid it out for you. It's not like you figure it out on your own.
Yeah, it's not hard to know what we're supposed to do. It's hard to actually do it. Fine, Lauren.